Good morning. We'd like to welcome everyone out on this cool Phoenix morning. I know it's difficult to come in from the 95-degree weather at 8:30 in the morning. I'd like to welcome you to Advanced Safety Management and Safety Cultural Principles. My name is Walter Heinrich. I am the moderator. I'm currently the Director of Safety at Houston Metro Rail. And today we are going to begin with a presentation from Mr. Gary Webster and Mr. James Grant. Mr. Webster is the former CEO of Toronto Transit Commission. He graduated from Queen's University as a civil engineer in 1975 and joined TTC soon afterwards. He served in various supervisory and management roles at TTC, including subway and equipment maintenance departments, transportation department, materials and procurement, service planning, before he went on to become the first CEO promoted from within the organization. Mr. Grant is currently a vice president at BST and previously worked for DuPont. He has designed and supported a number of comprehensive multi-year solutions for clients across a number of industries, including transportation, cement, and energy. These initiatives have resulted in the development of national and multinational safety strategies, as well as the achievement of zero-injury cultures. So we'll turn the time over to Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Walter. And thank you for the opportunity to share the Toronto Transit Commission story with you today. I'm going to share some lessons learned over many years, which included some very serious safety incidents which took place in Toronto on the TTC. This presentation is not about an SMS structure. It's about the approach that I would encourage all of us to consider and to take with regards to putting together a proper safety management system. As Walter mentioned, I'm retired from the TTC as its CEO, and as such, I'm not here today to speak on behalf of the Toronto Transit, but I am here to tell its story, and it's a story that occurred when I was there, and I'll share my thoughts with it as we go along through the slides. The message in this presentation is I think there's a lot to learn from the struggles and trials that we went through, and I hope if you can learn from them, you can avoid them in your system. It's important, I think, to set the context a bit for Toronto. On a global scale, Toronto is a medium-sized system. In North America, when you look at Toronto from a ridership perspective, we're the third largest system in North America after New York and Mexico City. With 1.7 million rides on a daily basis. Again, from a context perspective, APTA used the term that Toronto was leading, or one of the leaders in transit in North America, and they said that in the early 90s. Toronto was a city that people were coming to visit to see what was going on in transit. And there's a lot of neat things happening in Toronto. Ridership had been increasingly moving up in the last 20 years. We maintained our streetcar fleet, and we replaced it with new cars. The system was expanding in all aspects, and we were winning APTA awards and the Canadian equivalent CUDA awards year after year. So a lot of very positive things were happening. It was really encouraging to see people come and visit us and to take them around and show them our system. That was Toronto, and that's what APTA had to say about us. On August the 12th, 1995, a lot of things changed for the TTC. A subway train rear-ended a stop train. 3 customers were killed and over 30 people were injured. A system that was designed to be fail-safe failed. And an accident that couldn't happen, so we thought, did. David Gunn, who was our CEO at the time and demonstrated great leadership to get us through this, publicly accepted responsibility for what happened. A lot of things came out of that accident. We learned a lot about maintenance that we thought we knew, but we really didn't. We recognized that we really needed to tighten up and have better maintenance plans. The issues were much broader than just a train stop and trip-cock problem. We understood, we figured out that the operation of the system was pretty loosey-goosey. It was not a tight railway operation. As much as our rail maintenance was to standard, we really weren't planning it very, very well. And we weren't looking at the subway as a system, as a unique entity with different moving parts. And as a result of that, our maintenance was not very well coordinated. Bottom line was, we didn't know what we didn't know. We thought we were running a pretty good system, and we painfully learned that we had some serious problems. We missed a lot of the symptoms before this accident happened, and we were sensing that we had bigger problems. So out of this, actually some very positive things took place. We introduced some management tools, some formal structure to the organization, a railway type organization structure, an excellent asset management program that drove our capital budget for years and still does to this day. We asked APTA to provide safety oversight to our system. And we actually did some good things to actually strengthen our approach to public safety. On the positive side, while we recognized the operation, the culture of loose operation in terms of being a contributing factor to the accident, we really did miss the overall poor safety culture that we had that was embedded in all aspects of our business. So as we were continuing with a change in approach under the leadership of Gunn, we had an incident, an employee incident in 2006. 8 employees were overcome by carbon monoxide fumes working in the subway at night. 2 of them almost died. 6 of them were very seriously injured. This was a very serious incident. It shook the organization. Our employees were properly trained, but procedures weren't followed. We spent a lot of time with the employees, with their families. We talked a lot about carbon monoxide poisoning, short-term, long-term impact. We spent time with our Ministry of Labor to investigate this. We wrote a public report that went public 6 months after the incident. But we were still nagged by the fact that we couldn't answer the questions about why our employees, who were properly trained, didn't follow the procedures. We didn't have any good answers to that. So as a TTC, we weren't satisfied. Clearly our employees weren't satisfied, our workers involved weren't satisfied. It was a real wake-up call for us, and we had some real challenges trying to understand what happened. I'm going to click to the next slide, which is a video, and at that public meeting where we presented our report, which was a very open and transparent report that very clearly set out what happened, why it shouldn't have happened, what we were learning about it. We didn't have all the answers at that point. But I just want you to listen to the woman that's speaking. She is a spouse of one of our workers that almost died that night.
Jason has constantly loss of memory, headaches, gets upset, and post-traumatic stress and depression. We have to visit the doctor with fear he is suffering from a heart attack, only to find out it's from the anxiety because of February the 7th. He was told that on his EEG, it showed he has definite intermittent disturbance on the brain. Because I was not notified or called about this accident, I was unable to prevent my child from seeing his father on TV being wheeled on a stretcher. He constantly says, "Daddy almost died." He is afraid and needs to be reassured when Jason leaves that he will be returning to him. Jason has a major behavior change that I constantly feel like we're at a breaking point in our relationship. Every day is difficult to live through. My children are missing the attention they so deserve because we are constantly tired over this. They shouldn't have to deal with this. They're only 5 and 3. This has put a lot of stress, physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially. He should be getting paid 100% right now because this is TTC's fault for being negligent. Yes, he's alive right now, but if you put yourself in his position, he saw his body lose control, unable to walk, dragging himself on the floor, watching his body convulse, praying to God that he could see his children again, then passing out. Imagine coming to terms with that. Being an adult and losing control over your body. Then imagine never seeing your family again, never holding or kissing your children again. TTC has signs up saying no job is so urgent that you can't take time out to do it safely. Clearly, with all the warning signs and the ample time they had to act, for TTC, this job was too urgent. If you ask Jason what happened that night, he will tell you he died that day in the tunnel. One thing I want at the end of this day is that TTC doesn't treat the report as a PR opportunity, but rather it should state the facts. Those facts are that they were negligent and almost caused me to lose my best friend and the father of my children. Not only are they putting their employees at risk, but they're putting the public at risk, who unknowingly travel with potentially dangerous levels of carbon monoxide. I'm disgusted with the whole way this has been run. It's disgusting. You had warning upon warning upon warning. Nothing was done. You almost lost 8 lives, not to mention 4 firemen. When are you guys going to learn to listen? It's disgusting. What was I going to do with 2 children at home?
Mrs. Marcos, what can we do to make it right?
You can act. I've heard TTC say that they accept responsibility to act on this. We're suffering here. There's stress, there's anxiety, there's emotional pain, mental pain, physical pain, not to mention the stress of the financial issues. He's only getting paid 85%. It's not his fault. It's TTC's. They screwed up. They have ample warning. I want procedures in place. I want procedures so that the foreman report to whoever the supervisor is when they are told. So that this doesn't happen again. He almost died. You understand the gravity that this has affected everybody? It's affected my family. It's affected my friends, my relatives. I've had to go to my mother for money because of all the strings put on us. Every day, I've had to call his psychiatrist, begging him, please talk to Jason. He's getting out of control because he always gets upset with post-traumatic stress. And all I hear is, you have to understand. Right now, it's post-traumatic. He's going to take it a lot worse than it is. Please be patient. How patient can I be? I love him. And it hurts me saying it, but I don't want to be a battering ram. I don't want to have to put up with emotional abuse because it's happening because of this situation.
So Mrs. Marcos spoke at a public meeting, as I said, and that was 6 months after the incident. And you can hear how significantly she was affected and still was affected by that time. Very important for the organization to hear that. It just reinforced the need for us to really get to the root of the problem, to really understand what was going on and deal seriously with the problems that we had. Now we started shortly after the incident happened, and we did put procedures in place. We actually did a pretty good job of kind of putting a finger in the dike to make sure that a specific incident like the one that occurred would never happen again. But we kept reflecting back to the questions we really didn't have any answers to. Why employees didn't follow the procedures we had for them. We couldn't answer those questions. And we recognized that not only for the TTC, but for our employees, for all the families of our employees, we owed it to them to get to the bottom of it. We knew there was something else going on and we couldn't quite figure it out. So we sought the help of an external consultant, BST, and you're going to hear from James Grant in a moment. And we developed, with their significant input, a multi-year plan called Leading with Safety. And the most important piece of that was the first 2 items, leadership and employee engagement. The third piece, of course, was improving our safety systems, which we already had. They needed to be improved, of course. But the real key, the real important message in this whole presentation is those 2 points. The importance of leadership, the importance of employee engagement in addressing the problems that we had. You're going to hear me talk a lot now about safety culture. That's what we're talking about. We did have a plan to reduce our lost time accident rate by 50% over 3 years. That was our plan. So we're beginning our work with BST, and within a year, we had another serious subway accident. This time, one employee was killed. 2 of his co-workers were very seriously injured. Again at night, in the subway, different work, same problem, same symptoms, procedures not followed. And it just reinforced for us the need to stay on the track, to work with James and his organization to try and understand this and get our head around why our employees weren't following the procedures in which they were trained. One of the things that happened early on in our work with BST was to get a sense of the safety culture, to actually measure what our employees believe we as management are establishing as a safety culture. And the answer was very painful for us. Our employees told us very clearly that as much as we say safety is our first priority and safety is number one, they said very clearly, it's not. You guys are interested in service at the expense of everything else. A very painful message for us, but that's what our employees told us, and that set the tone for the next multi-years. So the elements of leading with safety, driven really by safety culture, was leadership, worker engagement, and safety systems. We learned the importance of having a proper attitude towards safety, what safety first really, really means. We understood better what it meant to actually listen to our employees at our health and safety committee meetings, to take seriously the concerns that they were raising, to actually address the issues that they shared with us. So we were getting on the right track. We're starting to understand what a good safety culture looked like and the work that was necessary to make that happen. We did, of course, address systems as well, our safety systems, but the real key was the leadership piece and the involvement of our employees. I won't go into this slide except to say that the majority of the improvement we saw occurred early on in the first year and a half. After 3 years, we didn't actually achieve a 50% reduction in our lost time incidents, but we did cut our lost time incidents by 25%, and we were pleased with that. And the reason we were pleased is because we were finally understanding the answers to our questions about why our employees were behaving the way that they were, and the importance of culture and the tone that we set as management, the importance of leadership in terms of changing that and getting engaged. At the CEO level, making sure the operations guys were driving the trains through the organization. Clearly safety was involved, but it wasn't going to happen without the active engagement of the CEO and the operations guys. Absolutely critical. We were getting to the root of the problem. Finally, the actions that we were taking were consistent with the words that we were saying for years. We were learning. We were starting to learn, starting to get on the right track. There were a lot of lessons learned that came out of this story, these steps in our story. I've talked a lot about leadership. Absolutely critical that the CEO is fully engaged, that not only the safety people are engaged, but the operations people really have to drive this change. The real key is leadership and employee engagement. As I said earlier, listening to your employees, actually taking seriously what they're saying and acting on it. And I think it's important to say at this point that we learned that leadership and proper employee engagement was more important than all the procedures that we had written. They weren't being followed. We weren't listening to them. We weren't respecting our employees. They weren't following what we asked them to. It was no surprise. The fact that we had leadership now that was listening and acting in a proper safety culture way changed everything. Our involvement with the union was not too bad. Could have been better. They should have been more of a partner. So that was a lesson learned for us as well. To be a little bit more specific, once we saw changes in our safety culture, we saw improvements across the board in a lot of other parts of our business. People started to come to work more often. We had less labor relations issues, and when we did have them, we were able to deal with them more effectively. Customer service, we noticed some customer service changes. just the way we were managing and dealing with our employees changed to be much more positive. We recognized that you needed to have this philosophy, this attitude of safety ingrained throughout the organization. Straightforward at the top down, when you're kind of faced with this as a senior person in an organization, you really get what needs to be done. Frontline guys really got it. Sometimes the people in the middle that actually have to drive it down, we call it the frozen middle. You got to make sure that they're properly engaged, because you have to make sure they're engaged to drive that message. Obviously, safety culture, leading with safety, it's got to be a core value. And it's very easy to say it is. It's very easy to put up posters or whatever you want to do to talk about your corporate priorities, your corporate strategy. Very straightforward, very easy to do. The tough stuff is actually acting consistent with that. Taking action that's consistent and ongoing. Not a light switch. Took us a long time to actually understand what our root problems were. Took us several years to actually start changing the safety culture, and it's an ongoing journey that you need to be on, that we need to be on, to make sure that we continue to fine-tune, continue to reinforce, and demonstrate as leaders that safety is important. Difficult environment in transit, won't go into any more detail on that, but thousands of operators, a lot of one-on-one, strong leadership needed there. The maintenance area, biggest risk areas, easier to contain those groups in workplaces, but the involvement of those people is absolutely critical. We've got a lot to learn from our employees. They understand the issues and challenges better than we do, and if we listen to them, we can actually make the system safer. The final point on this slide is we finally got to the point where we understood what a proper approach to safety management systems was. So as I mentioned at the outset, this presentation is not about what an SMS should look like or the structure or the plans or procedures related to it. It's how you approach an SMS. It's making sure that in addition to the procedures and practices and systems and plans you've got, that you don't miss the most important pieces, the leadership, the employee engagement. That now becomes a proper and comprehensive safety management system. It's always good to ask the question. You can ask yourselves this question: why am I at this presentation? So what? What do I do with this? I can flip it back to you. Having been through what we've been through, I would challenge you to ask yourself, do you really know what's going on in your system? Do you know what you don't know? Are you okay? Are your actions, your corporate actions, consistent with your core values, what you say your actions are, what your priorities are? Do you really have a positive safety culture? And is it woven into all aspects of your business? Do you see it everywhere? TTC was compliant for a long time, but we really weren't committed until we figured out the safety culture piece, the leadership and employee engagement. So your reaction to a presentation like this can be varied. One of your reactions might be that you really don't need to do anything, that you're okay, that you don't have a serious problem, that any issues that you do have, you can manage. And my response to that would be, that's where we were. And we fooled ourselves with all the awards that we won, and we really thought we were running a pretty tight system. And you can see from our story, we clearly weren't. We were wrong, and we learned painfully that procedures are only a very small piece of what's necessary to have a proper approach to safety, a proper safety management system. That if you don't understand why employees behave, if you don't understand what your culture is, if you don't have a proper safety culture, you really don't have an opportunity to have a really solid and effective safety management system. And we learned that in a very painful way. So, I've said this many times, most of us stop at the first point. And most of us do a pretty good job. Most of us in Toronto had pretty good procedures and practices, lots of plans in place. before all this happened. I would suggest that some, maybe many, systems in this room and in North America have some more work to do on the leadership piece, on the employee engagement piece. Because if you don't have a strong safety culture, if your safety is not really important, it doesn't really matter what the rest of your plan is. These are more important. The leadership piece and the employee engagement piece are more important than all the procedures and plans you have in place. So as a final thought slide, you've heard our story, and you can see very clearly that we missed a lot. We missed a lot of signs of public and employee safety. We were dealing with the symptoms. And to our credit, we actually responded pretty well to a lot of that stuff. Very specific, responding to incidents. We missed the root causes. We really did not deal with the root causes. And I really encourage you to think about the presentations that you're going to hear today, about whether you've got root problems. If you're only dealing with the symptoms, what are your root causes? And certainly for Toronto with safety culture, and I would suggest that really is the root cause that we're talking about for most of us in this business. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that this presentation on our story is an encouragement to you to learn from us and not to repeat some of the trials that we went through.
Thank you, Gary. My name is James Grant, and there's not a time that I see that video, and I think I've seen it probably 20 times at this point, where it doesn't tug at my heart, and I know it does everybody else also. It reminds me of why I do what I do, and why I'm in this industry, why after years of career, I am in my job, because of the impacts. And I will tell you, there are too many times, and Gary, this isn't meant to be critical, but a lot of leaders, an incident has to happen before they wake up and they say there's something wrong here. And what I want to spend a little bit of time is explaining what Gary's been talking about. Is there are measures that you can look at that can tell you if something's right or wrong before you have an accident. And we've done some work with TTC and a lot of other organizations about that. So I'm going to cover some of that. DACRA, by the way, Gary mentioned BST. DACRA, we were acquired by DACRA. We were a private company for 33 years. We were acquired by DACRA, which is a German nonprofit, which is focused on improving safety around the world. So it was a good for us because as a larger group, we have now much more investment and can expand. Just real quick about BST. We've been in this business for 35 years. Myself, I've been doing this with DuPont and then BST for about 25 years. There's a point, the second to last bullet, it says prevented estimated 160,000 injuries. That's an estimate, obviously. But when you think about the impacts that we have, we often can't quantify them because they just don't happen. So really this is an attempt to say, what could have been the impacts? And I'll show you kind of where some of those stats come from. So what is culture? This is Toronto, and this is a group of people. Probably looks very similar to this group of people that are in many of your organizations. This week I'll be in 3 different organizations, and everyone is the same in a lot of ways and very unique culturally. I was in Hawaii a couple weeks ago, and they were like a family. Another organization, very different. There was a rail leader I was working with where they just had a fatality. They had an employee who was 30 years with the organization. They had all the rules and procedures in place, and this person walked down the right of way and was struck by a train. And the question was, why? We've trained them. They have experience. I don't get it. And it goes back to what Gary says. As much as you do that, culture is a huge factor. That probably wasn't the first time that happened. There's probably other employees within that organization that had done that. So it's absolutely critical. The other thing I'll mention is it's really hard work. Don't underestimate it. Culture is going one way or the other. If you're not managing it as an organization, it's managing you. So as leadership, it's absolutely critical to say, what are we doing to improve the culture? Otherwise, it may be going the wrong direction. And even over all those years of work, I will tell you, I continue to learn more and more as we go through this. Not every project we have has outstanding success. There's challenges with every organization, and I'll try and convey some of those today as we go through. So just real quickly, what is culture and what is climate? We actually say there's no such thing as a safety culture, even though we talk about it a lot. Don't mean to be critical, Gary. But culture is really broad. Culture is all those things in your organization. It's what people do every day. It's really the sum of all the behaviors in your organization. So if you go into any organization, you immediately look around, you see what people do, that's the culture. It is not what's written on the walls. It's how people do things and get things done. And what we say is there's also something called climate. And climate are specific around certain areas. So you can have an operational climate, on-time kind of climate. You can have a safety climate, of course. And the difference between climate, it's more in the foreground. It's more overt. You talk about it more. It changes much more rapidly. After an accident, climate changes quickly. So after an accident, people are very on top of things. But the challenge is culture is very strong. And so ultimately changing culture means you change climate for a very long time and it becomes the way people are. And I'll tell you, this statement is one that I will stress time and time again. If you have a strategy, if you're putting it in an SMS, and you aren't paying attention to culture, culture will win. And we've seen it time and time again. The work we did with NASA after Columbia, the same root causes for Columbia, the root causes for Columbia were the same root causes for Challenger. That culture with NASA changed quickly, but came back. Same thing could happen with Tron Transit, could shift one way, but without that continual feeding and managing it, it will shift back. How much of an impact does culture have on performance? This is the most extensive study done connecting organizational factors to safety outcomes. So this is a survey that we've done with hundreds of thousands of organizations, and they score between a 1 and a 5 in terms of how they feel, how strong they are. And if you look across the bottom, what you can see is the breakout of the 224 client sites. So organizations that scored less than a 3.39 typically had occupational injury rates of a 7.0. As you go down to the very far right, those that had a 3.76 had a 2.0 on average. That's a pretty major difference. The difference between a 3.0 is a neutral and a 4.0 is an agree. Just to put that in perspective. So it's a pretty major factor within an organization. What are those things that were measured by that study? Those things are on this page, and even though they are correlated to safety, we spent years and years trying to understand performance, and the way we got into it is, frankly, we looked at the extremes of our client performance. We looked at the ones that were outstanding, and we looked at the ones that were challenged, and we tried to correlate the differences. We looked at everything from type of industry, union, non-union, age of the workforce, you name it. We looked at lots of factors. None of them came back correlated. So we sent the consultants into the sites and said, see what you can find out. And they came back and said, well, we knew pretty quickly whether these guys were strong or not. And what they really picked up was culture. And so from that, we worked with University of North Carolina to understand which factors actually correlate to safety. And these do. Of all these 9 factors, only 3 of them have the word safety in them. 6 of them are more general. So 4 of them are organizational specific. Things like, does the organization care about me? Is my boss fair? Is management credible? Is my boss looking out for me? Do they have my back? 2 of them are particularly around the work functioning, which is, do we get along and can we get work done together? And then 3 are safety specific, which are, does the organization really value safety? Can I talk to my boss about safety if I have an issue? And can I approach my coworkers? Is that something I'm comfortable with? Now, these things impact a lot of different areas within an organization. So they are correlated to safety, but as Gary mentioned, they impact whether someone's going to want to show up every day. So what you really get are people that are saying, hey, the organization is looking out for me. I'm going to do what the organization asks. So it's citizenship behavior, and that's a big factor. Because a lot of times we ask employees to do things that aren't the easiest, aren't the most comfortable. They take longer, do hard work, and these kind of things correlate to a lot of different areas like job satisfaction, turnover, and other things. What we've seen in all the work we've done is as you're improving safety, your employees are happier. They like where they're working better. Things are working more efficiently, which is a very good benefit because obviously you wouldn't want anything else. And then ultimately, these are the safety outcomes that they impact, everything from direct incidents to cost. So again, why would you need to improve? If safety isn't enough to improve, these are all the other things that are tied into this. Really labor management relations. Gary mentioned that, working with another client, Rail, their labor grievances dropped off the map. You've got people that are more flexible, people more open to change. And obviously, if your employees are happier, they're going to have their interface are going to be with their customers are going to be better. So that's kind of the why culture is important, which hopefully I've just hit that point in terms of the correlation. Now the question then next is, how do you change it? So we did the research study. We understood the factors that impacted safety performance, the cultural factors, and then we stepped back and said, okay, now that we know that, what do we do with it? Can we actually change it? And so we did a lot of work with understanding leadership best practices, understanding leadership styles, what's more effective and not effective. And I'm not going to get into all the depth of that today. But what I will tell you in just this slide is, and Gary mentioned with their approach, is you've got to understand, you got to align your leadership, you got to educate your leadership, you got to ensure everyone's on board, and you need to make sure you don't have passive resistance, which is a big deal, and it happens a lot. And if it's there, you need to work on it, and if that doesn't work, you need to get rid of it, frankly. At the very top levels, one of my colleagues in my position became the president of New York MTA, and he had worked in my role in our business for years and tried to apply a lot of those things to New York MTA. And he told me afterwards, and he said, a lot of things like worked, but he said one learning I had, which was a lot different than what we had done, and even what we had done with TTC, is the value of aligning the top leadership was much harder than I thought it would take, and the impact was much more significant once it happened. So the point there was it takes a lot of work to get your top leadership on board, really understanding all the concepts. And what he said is when those leaders could lead safety like I was, it took off at that point. And so within your organizations, don't underestimate the amount of work at this level, and don't underestimate the impact. Because without this, you struggle with anything else you do. Measure climate. There's tools out there. There's tools for safety leadership capability. I've mentioned some of those. You don't wait for an accident. Measure it now. Understand what you have and what you don't have, what you can do to strengthen it. There's a client I'm working with in the utility sector. Culture scores became part of their annual bonus. Never done that before, and I will tell you that leaders manage culture. They actually went through a reduction of force and still improved scores because of how they managed it, because they were transparent with the employees, they told them ahead of time and everything else. Again, these are the factors, and we've covered those already, so I won't go back to those again. Stop doing the things that undermine your safety. I've heard a quote, and I've heard it a million times, is anything we do in safety is good. I don't subscribe to it. There are a lot of things you can do in safety that will hurt your organization. And leaders do them for the right reasons. I'm not trying to take anything back, but they may not think through all the implications of them. So what are some of those things? You focus on injuries, so keeping people from getting hurt, even though you have risks within your organization and exposure. That is a mistake. So if people know there's safety risks and you're just saying don't get hurt, that's a problem. Talking about zero injuries while you have issues within your organization. Making bonus compensation contingent on recordable rates. organizations make this mistake. OSHA now has a regulation that forbids this. Especially when you get down to the frontline workers, at that level, their impact in their injury performance should never be correlated to safety performance because it can drive reporting underground. It really has to be larger groups, so more senior management is fine with lagging measures. Anything below that is really a mistake for an organization to do. Just other things up here like not responding, making safety number one on the agenda for a safety meeting, but then trivializing it. So the other piece is make sure you have to get everybody engaged. And everybody engaged isn't just frontline. It's leadership. It's that frozen middle, which is often a challenge with a lot of the clients we work with, is that middle layer tends to be forgotten. A lot of people don't want to invest in the middle layer because it's huge. So you can invest in your top leadership and spend hundreds of thousands on them because you can leverage that. Now, when you have 3,000 leaders in a large organization at that middle to frontline level, that's a pretty big investment. And a lot of people don't really have a touch with that. And so they just say, well, those leaders will figure it out. Not the case. Those individuals, that organizational characteristic around the supervisor is the most correlated to safety performance. That relationship is critical. And so it's absolutely critical to focus on that. So at the front line, there's a lot of different approaches to the front line to engage your employees. We've done a lot of work with behavior-based safety over the years. At the middle level, it's around really giving them the skills, more tactical skills, and reinforcing that, mentoring it, ensuring that they stick. And at the senior level, a lot of times we just do coaching and training at that level. So point around this that I'll make is don't bite off more than you can chew. Some organizations we work with wanted to do the entire organization, and jump in full, and the reality is they were not able to manage that. And we can't manage it for an organization. And if you're not able to manage whatever you're doing, don't do it because it's just not going to work. So only commit to what you can effectively manage and ensure that it's successful before you roll into another area in the organization. It's absolutely critical. The best clients that we work with in rail have been doing this for 8 to 10 years, and they're doing it at a pace where they can manage it, and they are paying attention to every detail to make sure that it's successful. Move from injuries to an exposure for injuries. That is a concept that is still emerging within a lot of industries. So the basic premise is, I used to tell my guys in the morning when I was a supervisor and manager, don't get hurt today. No one wants to get hurt. Even the guy who got injured didn't do that because they think they're going to get hurt. They don't. But they do know that their exposure can go up. They know they may be taking risks. They know they may be not tied off and they're taking risks. They may be driving without a seatbelt and they're taking risks. That increases your exposure. So there's a shift that's really critical for an organization to move from injuries to exposure. It's also a shift in how injuries are investigated in that instead of looking at the outcome, so working with the utility, employee falls off a pole, lands in the mud and sprains his ankle. Another employee steps out of a truck, is on gravel, steps on the gravel, sprains his ankle. They're both sprained ankles. They're both investigated at the same level of scrutiny. Do you think they both had the same potential? No. The guy who fell off the pole fell 20 feet. He landed next to a hydrant. He just happened to land in mud. He could have gotten killed. So it's important for an organization to look at the potential and to react accordingly. So around this, I've hit some of these points already. And then develop leading indicators. I've talked about culture, that's a leading indicator. Serious injury and fatalities is also another leading indicator, which is paying attention to those things that can lead to someone dying. There is a difference between leaning back in your chair and falling and maybe spraining your wrist versus someone who's walking in the right of way. They are very different potential outcomes. And it's important not to forget about the chair, but it's important to have a different and more intense approach on your more serious things. This is an example of a leading indicator, which is percentage of safe behaviors, and this is within a rail, passenger rail. And this is a valid leading indicator also. And then this is performance, and this is just, I've talked about how hard it is. And this is trying to keep you from getting discouraged. TTC had an improvement. They had 25% improvement. This is a study we did with 353 clients over many years. There's 6 years on average. It's about a 52% improvement in safety performance, which is the gray bar, which is the median. The top, don't look at the top. That's the top quartile. Those are kind of skewed because a lot of organizations are small and they go from 2 injuries or to 0 a lot of times, and so that skews that. But the median is the best one to look at. And so what it says is it's doable. When we were helping NASA return to flight, they had a significant climate change within 6 months. And because they put the attention to it. So it's doable, but it just takes the right approach and it just takes focus. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
As working in a transit agency myself, I understand what you go through when there's serious injuries and fatalities. Our next speaker will be Miss Andrea Jones. Ms. Jones brings 17 years of DuPont experience to the sustainable solutions business and has considerable experience implementing the DuPont safety management systems within a variety of industries, including food, healthcare, transportation, nuclear, and oil and gas. She has proven expertise in the areas of mechanical reliability and process engineering and served in expanded roles as a product steward and technical representative. Ms. Jones also has experience in manufacturing, engineering polymers, and project management. She has training in problem-solving techniques, specifically root cause failure analysis. Ms. Jones holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology and a master's degree in industrial engineering from The Ohio State University. And so now she'll be speaking on using SMS principles to create value for your agency. There we go.
Yes. Hit it again. F5.
Thank you, Walter. Hello, everybody. I am happy to be here today to talk to you about how you can bring value to your organization through a safety management system. And particularly, I do want to focus on MAP 21 and talk about how you, and maybe give you some practical tips on how you can take this MAP 21 regulation and really bring value to your organization. 18 years ago, I started with DuPont as a mechanical engineer. And for my first 5 years with DuPont, in various roles, my responsibility, or at least one of my responsibilities, was to implement or improve elements of DuPont's safety management system in our operating plants. And now, this last 8 or 9 years that I've been working with DuPont, I've been within our consulting business, DuPont Sustainable Solutions, where I'm doing the same thing. I'm working with clients, helping them improve or implement elements of safety management systems. So, although I don't have academic training in safety management, I have over a decade of experience in actually applying these principles within an organization. As a result of that experience, I've seen how a well-implemented safety management system can really improve an organization. And Gary and Jim have already shown you some statistics on how when you improve your safety management system, you see reductions in injuries, you see improvement in efficiencies of your operations. And so I want to tell you that there is value in MAP 21, and it can bring value to your organization. I want to talk about that a little bit today. A little bit about DuPont. How many people knew DuPont consulted in safety before today? Okay. So a few of you all in the room, and that's kind of a typical response that we get. You know, when we ask, you know, did you know DuPont consulted in safety, right? A lot of people see DuPont as a chemical company, right? Or the company that makes automotive paint, or the company that sponsors Jeff Gordon in NASCAR. And DuPont is well over 200 years old, and we've evolved over those years. And so we're no longer a chemical company, we're a science company. We no longer make automotive paint, and we no longer sponsor Jeff Gordon. But one of the things that has been consistent with DuPont over all our years of operations is our commitment to safety. Safety is our core value. So, as a result, we've kind of positioned ourselves as a global leader for clients that are looking to improve their safety organization, that are looking to become safer, looking to become more efficient, looking to become more environmentally sustainable. You can see we have a diverse clientele. We work across many industries. We work in the private sector, we work in the public sector, and we work in government sectors. We have worked with transit agencies that are represented here today. I personally spent about 3 years at one of the urban transit agencies represented here today, working with them on their safety management system. So that's a little bit about where our expertise lie and how we've developed that over the years. And so again, I want to talk about some practical tips that can be applied in your organization around safety management systems. So, what I do know is that safety management systems is not a new thing. Most of you all, if not everyone in this room, your organization already has safety management systems in place. You already have elements of your safety management system. So, now that we have this MAP 21 regulation, what does that mean to you, right? How I see it as an opportunity for you to improve your safety management system, to improve what you already have in place, build off of that, and strengthen that. Because when you strengthen your safety management system, you're strengthening your safety culture, right? And we've already talked about the benefits of that. So there really lies a big opportunity for you all, for the transit agencies, right? We know that companies these days, and I would say more often or most impactful is with the transit agencies, the fact that information transfers from people, government, our customers instantly. And we have an obligation to create a positive image for our organization. If we want to be successful out here, if you want to have a successful transit organization, you need to present yourself positively amongst your riders, right? And how do you do that? By becoming safer, by becoming more efficient. And your safety management system and MAP 21 can move you closer to a more safer agency and a more efficient one. So the goal will be how you embrace MAP 21. How you embrace the components and the subcomponents. Do you see this as just a compliance activity where, okay, I have this, I have this, I have this, so I'm done? Or are you going to use it as an opportunity to improve what you have in place? And so I want to talk about how you can actually make some improvements. But I want to acknowledge the fact that every day you guys have a balancing act that you have to do, right? You are trying to address the immediate issues that are impacting your schedule, your ridership, right? Your customers. And it seems like on a daily basis, there's always a fire that you're trying to put out to make sure you're still running on time, to make sure that your customers are still happy. And so I understand that balancing act that you have to do, that when you look up at the end of the day, you haven't spent as much time as you wanted to on the things that are proactive around safety. But let's all acknowledge the fact that it is very important that we must work on this safety management system because it does have true benefit. And so it's very important that we do that. If you look at the BLS data, and again, Jim and Gary, or at least Jim showed some data around injuries, you know, urban transit workers are probably twice as likely to get injured on the job than the average worker, according to BLS data. And if you've seen some of the improvements that Jim talked about, his clients have experienced from safety management systems, our clients have experienced reductions in injuries, like 40% around lost workday cases, as many as much as 60% around workers' comp claims, and anywhere between 30 and 40% of third-party claims. You know the importance of safety management system and implementing it good. Now, at DuPont, we measure the strength of our safety management system through our culture. And what we learned in studies years and years ago, DuPont decided to look within their own operations to understand why some plants performed better from an injury standpoint than others. And from that study, we understood that it was the safety culture that really had an impact on injury rates. And Jim just told you that, right? And so we established this proprietary measurement for safety culture, because we believe safety culture is an indication of how strong your safety management system is. And so organizations on the left side of this, what we call Bradley curve, they tend to be more reactive, right? When incidents happen, they tend to blame somebody as the root cause. And in order to get employees engaged and really active in the safety management process, they really have to be directed or forced by their supervision. And if you're on the left side of that Bradley curve, you can see that your injury rates will tend to be high. As you move to the right side and transition over into a more independent or interdependent culture, the things that you see are employees are fully engaged. They enjoy what they do. They take personal commitment to their safety and to the safety of others. And you see strong leadership commitment. But you also see a reduction in injuries as well, right? So we use this within DuPont, and really globally, there are a lot of people there are a lot of companies using our Bradley curve, as well as, safety organizations using this as a measure of culture, because it's an indication of the strength of the safety management system. So, how strong is your culture? Where does your culture lie here? Because that's an indication of the strength of your safety management system. Now, wherever you are on this Bradley curve, there is opportunity to move to the right. And MAP 21 can get you there. These are the components and subcomponents of MAP 21. And so the first thing, as I move into talking about some of the practical tips that I want to share with you around implementing or strengthening your safety management system. The first thing I would say is you take a look at this list of components and subcomponents, and you need to assess your organization and understand what currently exists in your organization and what elements or components you're missing today, right? And you want to put those in place. The second thing that I would suggest that you do is to also, in that assessment, identify which of these subcomponents you need to strengthen. And then the third thing I would say is to make sure that your safety management system, or the components within your safety management system, are integrated, right? These elements should not be working in silo. They should be working together. And a well-operating safety management system is an integrated safety management system. So let me talk a little bit about the integration of your safety management components. And then I'll start to talk about ways that you can improve each of these MAP 21 components. Let's look at, for an example, the safety, accountability, and responsibility subcomponent. Now, how would that be integrated in some of the other areas within this MAP 21 safety management system? Safety, accountability, and responsibility should be identified for each of your processes, for each of the elements here. So you think about hazard identification and analysis. You think about safety risk evaluation. How are you identifying safety, accountability, and safety responsibility? At DuPont, safety accountability lies at the leadership level. And so each of our operations leaders, because operations is responsible for safety, so each of our operations leaders sponsors one of these subcomponents. And they take accountability for the efficacy of that component. Responsibilities within those components lie at all levels of the organization. They lie at middle management as well as the employee level. You know, it's been said already today numerous times, the importance of leadership commitment in your safety management system as well as employee engagement in your safety management system. So there should be employee responsibilities integrated in all of these elements. I want to map safety, accountability, and responsibility to safety performance monitoring and measuring. So you're monitoring and you're measuring your safety performance, right? So you're looking at leading indicators. You're looking at which, you know, we talked about, or Jim gave an example of, you know, the perception of your organization being a leading indicator. You have lagging indicators, which are your injury performance, right? Your injury rates. Who is accountable for those numbers? How are you linking accountability and responsibility to those numbers? At DuPont, our operations leaders are accountable for those numbers. So whether they're good or bad, on a frequent basis, they are explaining or talking to those numbers and are accountable and are able to explain the results or understand why the results are as they are. So we, again, link safety, accountability, and responsibility to the safety monitoring and measurement. Also, we integrate safety, accountability, and responsibility through our job or yearly evaluations. So we make sure that safety is a component of your job evaluations, your yearly evaluations, and ultimately your compensation. So that's just an example of how all the subcomponents must be integrated, so you have a fully integrated system. Okay, so I said I wanted to talk about how you can begin to improve the individual components of the safety management system and just give you a couple of, you know, practical tips on how to do that. I first want to start talking about the safety policy, right? So that was one of the components of MAP 21, safety policy. Who's committed to your safety policy? My experience is that safety policy are usually words on a paper. Sometimes they're nicely framed and hung on leaders' walls in their office, right? But they have little impact to the organization. It doesn't speak to the employee, doesn't communicate to the employee their value within the organization's commitment to the employee's safety. And therefore, how can the employees be committed to it? How are leaders committed to that safety policy? And so the safety policy is actually that message to your organization that says, here's what we're going to do around safety, here's how you're involved in it, and here's why we value you as a part of our organization, and this is why we're going to keep you safe. So if that's what your policy should communicate, is it doing that? And if the answer is no, then how can you start using your safety policy to engage your organization, to ignite some commitment to safety? Some of the work that we've done with some of our clients is we've helped them recommit to safety, where safety policies usually are some legacy document, right? 20 years old, 30 years old, and they still have relevance today, right? And so we don't encourage our clients to change their policy. We just say, hey, why don't you present this policy to your organization in a new way, in a way that really communicates to your employees, in a way that touches them on an emotional level, in a way that is going to engage them, is going to ignite their commitment. Wrap it around a branding campaign. Establish a branding or communication campaign that is going to re-engage your organization and show your leadership and show your organization that leadership is committed to their safety. I want to show you an example of how we've done that at a client, because we truly believe that you can take a formal, structured safety policy that you've had in place for decades and now make it a powerful message to your organization.
I started over 30 years ago in Roanoke, Virginia. Was in Roanoke for about 7 years, then moved to Knoxville, and then after that went to Cleveland, St. Louis, Kansas City, Greenville, South Carolina, Bluefield, Atlanta, and then now to Norfolk. Obviously we moved a lot, like a lot of the other operations division supervisors, so home for us is wherever the four of us were at. And that was kind of our home. If my daughters are home, we'd like to make a big breakfast the next day and make a big deal of it. And for 30 years, that's been my focus, to be able to do that and come home to my family, my wife, my daughters. When you're out there on the railroad, you know that you gotta be paying attention, you gotta be communicating with everybody, you gotta be watching out if you're gonna get home safely. So safety is a condition of employment in Norfolk Southern. We believe that. If you're gonna work out here, we expect you to work safe. It starts with training, but the rules, procedures, process, regulations that we've put in place are required so that everybody comes home safe at the end of the day. It's not something we take lightly. It's something that we talk about regularly, and we do that because it's a reminder that you have to be focused all the time. Because I can't imagine not coming home to my family at the end of the day. I am Mike Wheeler, and I am coming home.
So Mike Wheeler is a VP at Norfolk Southern. The 6 tenets of safety is their safety policy. How powerful is that communication to their employees, saying, we want you to come home, and trying to connect with them on a personal level? This is something that your organization can do, and the great tool that this can be when you get new employees into the organization and they can see a 2-minute video around your commitment to safety. And you all have trainings, your training programs and your new employee programs when you bring them in are days long or week long. Norfolk Southern has 6 tenets of safety. Imagine if each day their new employees came into the training session and saw a new safety tenet. That's a more powerful way to communicate the safety policy than giving them a sheet of paper and saying, read the safety policy and sign off. It's all about engaging the employee and trying to get them committed, because we already talked about this shows leadership commitment, and it's an effort to engage the employee on an emotional level. The next thing I want to talk about is the safety management component within MAP 21. And the question I want to pose is, are known hazards still causing injuries? And that's one of the questions that I like to ask clients when they start to talk about, what do we do around safety management? Because there are a couple of things that you can do, right? But first I want to know, are known injuries still causing you injuries? And if the answer to that is yes, then we need to figure out how we start working with employees to get them to follow the rules, right? They know the rules, they know the hazards. How do we get them to engage and be more conscious of their decisions and be more conscious about reducing risk? There is a lot of study. The first step to that, and what has been historically the practice, is behavioral-based safety approach, which is a strong foundation, a needed foundation within the organization. But if we're doing that and we're still getting injured by things we know are out there, then what we've seen and what our most recent approach to addressing risk, and especially at a personal level with the employees, is an effective-based science approach, which is the next step beyond behavioral-based safety. There is a lot of research out there and a lot of studies around neuroscience and the way that we as humans make decisions. And that's, if we're still getting hurt by known hazards out in the field, then our employees, we're making decisions around safety that are putting themselves in harm's way. And so there are approaches out there, particularly effective-based safety approaches, that take you to the next level, okay? You don't abandon behavioral-based safety approaches. This is the next level. If we're talking about improving our systems, this is the next level. To engaging your employees on a personal level, helping them understand that they take risks, everyone takes risks, and how you can take risks that you can mitigate and also reduce the risk that you take when possible. Now, if the answer is no, we aren't getting hurt by known injury or known hazards, we've already taken care of that, we're doing well in that area, then you want to look at, okay, well, what are the hazards out there that we don't know? And I think Gary talked about that earlier. What is it that you don't know, right? And so this is DuPont's 4-step approach to safety management, to helping us identify what are the hazards out there in our workplace, right? How can we evaluate the risks associated with these hazards and reduce the risk? Most importantly, now that we understand what the hazards are and what the risks these hazards impose, how do we begin to involve our employees and make them aware of these hazards so that they don't get hurt by them? And then how do we sustain this? How do we continue? The identification of hazards is a continuous process, right? It's not a one-time event. You have to continuously work to identify hazards that are out there and put things in place to reduce the risks that your employees are exposed to and make them aware and involve them either through communication and or training. And this is DuPont's 4-step approach to that. The next component in MAP 21 is safety assurance, right? DuPont uses a continuous process here that is really focused on making sure our safety management processes are effective and that they improve our safety performance overall. And so the way that we implement our continuous process and the way we focus on safety assurance at DuPont is through our safety committees and our central safety organization, or our governing structure. And so within our governing structure, we have subcommittees for each of our safety processes. And those subcommittees have stewardship over processes. They are responsible for identifying how effective those processes are, identifying opportunities for improvement, and ultimately ensuring that they are making an impact on our overall safety performance in terms of injury reduction. So we do that through our safety committee structure. And then the last component within MAP 21 that I want to talk about is the promotion of safety. Actually, MAP 21, in this section, when they talk about promotion of safety, they emphasize executive leadership commitment, and they emphasize employee engagement. So through promotion of safety, how are executive leaders going to get involved? At DuPont, we would say executive leaders need to always be talking about safety. Whenever they engage with their workforce, they need to talk about safety. The first thing that they should talk about is safety. Did you all have a safe evening last night? Did you know that your area has gone so many days without injuries? That is a great accomplishment. Keep it up. Or what are you all doing to be so successful? It's just a matter of asking one question around safety, because that gives a message to your organization that that's your top priority. That's on top of your mind, right? What about another opportunity is that leaders start all of their meetings talking about safety. It's the first thing on the agenda, whether it's a safety message to increase the awareness of their organization, or it's a review of safety statistics. But having safety as a part of their agenda in every meeting with their staff and having it at the first part of their agenda shows that commitment. And it promotes safety. When your leaders are talking about safety, it's promoting safety within your organization because it's expressing to your organization what's important. It also, promoting safety in MAP 21 also talks about increasing the awareness of employees through communication and training, right? And so if we connect that to leadership commitment, at DuPont, we have our supervisors train our employees, and in both the operations part of their job and the safety part of that job, because that presents the supervisor and the manager as a resource to go to for safety. And that shows the ownership lies within the supervision and the management role for safety. It also allows the employee or the manager to learn more about the employee, learn about how the job is being done out there in the field. So that's another tip to improve how you're promoting safety, is seeing how you can have managers and supervisors train around safety as well. Lastly, I want to talk about the training and communication. Your training and communication must hit the mark the first time and every time, because you're pulling people off the line, you're pulling people, from their work, from their schedule to do training. So it must be impactful, and it must hit the mark every time. So when I say hit the mark, what do I mean? It should be aligned with your job procedures. So are you sure that your training and communication is aligned with your job procedures? Are you sure that your training and communication is delivering or transferring knowledge to your employees and therefore developing a competent workforce? Those are areas you can look into to improve your safety management system, the effectiveness of your training. And then lastly, I go back to the effective-based approach, reaching employees on an emotional level. When you are communicating to your employees and trying to increase their awareness about safety in your organization, you must hit them on the emotional level, especially in the rail organization, right? That you all tend to have seasoned employees. Maybe on the bus side, there's more turnover, and the employees on that side have fewer years with the organization. But typically what you see on the rail side are seasoned workers and employees. So they know the rules, right? So your annual communication with them around the rules and around training, they know it. So how are you going to impact them on an emotional level? You need to think about that. A good example of that is years ago, how do we warn people about, how do we try to encourage people not to smoke? Years and years ago. We told them about the dangers of it, right? We told them that it will cause cancer and all of these things. But what are the campaigns looking like now? They're actually showing people who are affected by the years and years of smoking, and how people can't talk, and how people, don't have teeth and things like that, because it's reaching them at an emotional level. And that's what your communication and awareness needs to do. So, in conclusion, because I'm getting signals that I'm talking too long, safety management principles can create value within your organization. I hope I've shown you some ways that you can actually transform your safety organization using MAP 21, and I hope that you are encouraged to take the opportunity of the MAP 21 regulation and strengthen your system. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker will be Mr. David Fulton. He's currently the Director of Fixed Route Products at Trapeze Group. He has 30 years' experience in building, designing, and implementing planning, scheduling, and operations management solutions for the public transit industry. He has served in leadership roles at the Trapeze Group for nearly 19 years and has managed many aspects of the software for transit business, including sales and marketing, customer delivery, customer care, and development. Under David's leadership, some of Trapeze's most successful products were founded, including FX and Blockbuster for scheduling and run cutting. So, Mr. Fulton. Thank you. Didn't do it, did it?
You got it.
There.
Okay, I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about how you manage safety within the workforce. And essentially every day in your organizations out there, hundreds if not thousands of activities are dished out to your employees by people for activities such as driving the vehicles and dealing with the yard activities that are going on. And part of what I'm going to talk about today is how you manage that, how do you make sure that the people that you're actually assigning to these activities are the right types of people, they're trained properly, and they're within the rules that are governed. I'm going to show you some statistics. These statistics come from a number of places. On the heels of the O'Hare accident that the CTA had, Newsweek did an article. Some of the statistics you'll see come from that article. And the FTA, FRA did a report about 6 years ago on some incident-related statistics. So 66% of incidents out there today in the rail workforce come from workforce error. Someone made a mistake doing their job, whether they didn't follow procedure, they missed a signal, they did something that violated or was against what they had learned in training. And what's really scary is 50% of that can be attributed to fatigue. So a lot of people, a lot of workers in the rail systems and bus systems are tired, right? They're working too long, too many hours, and a lot of that goes back to the contracts. And the other statistic that's kind of scary is there's been an 80% increase in this stuff over the last 10 years. And that could be for various reasons. Lots of you from agencies have shortages of people. You have a hard time getting operators these days. You have an aging workforce of people retiring, and lots of things happen. So there's a lot of workforce error-related statistics out there right now. And then when we look at an injury risk profile, and these kind of charts are hard to read, but basically the inner circle refers to where is the risk in your organization when there's going to be an injury. And 55% of the time, the risk is related to the people that are riding your system. Patrons are people in your system, but they're not actually riding yet, so they're on platforms, they're in the station, they're in the parking lot, those types of things. Smaller risk, so you can see 55% of the risk is to the passenger if there's going to be an injury. The outer circle refers to, out of that 55%, where does the risk lie with? So the customer behavior or the workforce behavior. So 49% of the 55% of injuries was a result of someone in your workforce that did something that caused that passenger to be injured, okay? And then there's other bigger factors, public behavior is people, walking the track or, leaning into a platform and those types of things. So this is kind of important to understand that there's the biggest risk is the people that are actually using your system, and the largest factor in that is how your people deal with this or what they've done to their behavior to cause the injury. Rail continues to be safest. I was really interested in this chart when I saw it, that You know, you're more likely to die traveling on a ferry boat than you are riding in a passenger train or commuter train or on a subway or on a bus, for that matter. It's second only to driving your car. And the accident rates from a heavy rail perspective and a light rail perspective vary differently in that light rail, the biggest accident rate is the trains, light rail trains hitting cars at level crossings. By far the most situation where accidents occur. And heavy rail accidents occur in this other category, which is everything else other than a level crossing collision or a non-level crossing collision, and those types of things. So that could be, a lot of that is equipment failure, you know, those types of things on the heavy rail side. So very, you know, I don't want to say it's all gloom and doom, but still a very, very safe way to go. Now, you have a lot of challenges in managing this in the rules that are out there, that the FRA has rules, but they're increasing faster than the level of service increases. And there's lots of reasons for that. Could be infrastructure issues, but it's the faster the increase in the level of service is being outpaced by the number of accidents that occur. The FRA rules are extremely complex for managing things. I don't know how many of you are managed by FRA, but and require real deep understanding of the rules and regulation when you're dispatching workforce, when you're doing crew calling and you're sending people out. It's a very complicated process. And to some degree, in the FRA world, the employees are in control of this in some ways. So they can ask for rest, and they can control sort of the message that they're delivering to the dispatch staff. So there's some onus on the operator themselves or the crew themselves to manage their own fatigue and their own rest. The FTA side, where you have subways and light rails, and a lot of people in the room are governed by these, there isn't really any federal standard for rules. Wide disparity in the rules state to state, agency to agency, very difficult to change. And a lot of the rail rules came out of bus, so on the FTA side, in some of the newer sort of properties that have built light rail systems, so they're not always set up very well. And then you have budgets, aging workforce, lots of factors that come into this. So if we boil all this down, and I'm being an engineer and a computer science guy and building systems, what we did, we have a workforce management tool that we use to and deliver to a number of customers in North America. And we kind of boiled this down into objects. And when you do computer and engineering, you always look at what are the objects, what are the things that we need to manage in here. So if we look at, there's a number of these that are what we call employee attributes, or things that we can attach to a person in your workforce. We have things that have to be managed. So what attributes have to be managed within your organization as far as the skills that they have, the qualifications that they have, how do we manage those things? And then we have assignment attributes. So when we assign something to somebody, what kinds of things that we need to manage and monitor? So when we talk about employees, there's all kinds of things that we have to manage about them. There's federal rules, licensing. If you need a CDL, you need some kind of federal mandated documentation that says I'm qualified to do this job, right? Whether that's a trade or working on components in the maintenance department, there could be some licensing that needs to be managed. All kinds of medicals and physicals that we need to deliver to those employees and make sure that they're qualified to do that. And then we have this complicated trying to manage training and qualifications, because a training class, one or more training classes can turn into one or more qualifications, and one or more qualifications can turn into what we refer to in the system as a skill, and I'll get to that in a second. And then you have all these assignment attributes. Is this person qualified to work in this location, in this department, in this job? Are they qualified and have been properly trained to drive this type of vehicle or work in this consist? Are they qualified to drive a worker train when we're sending equipment out for, doing track maintenance? Are they qualified to deal with the type of person they are? And in the rail world, you could have layers of qualification. They could be qualified to be an engineer, a conductor, and a flagman and a switchman and a yard personnel. There's all kinds of different layers there. And then you have work types. So when I dish out the work, I need to make sure that I'm matching these things up. And so what we did is we came up with this concept of an employee skill and something called a required skill. So in order to do employees, all of those things kind of boil down into what we refer to as a skill. So everything from they have the license, they've passed their medicals, they've got all the required training, and then the different components on the assignment side come into what we call required skills, and then those things are matched up so that you make sure that when I'm assigning an employee that they have the right required skills to do those activities. Okay? So that's all great, we can manage that, and your people probably do that on a daily basis. The other thing that comes into this is what we call work rules. So now you get into how many hours has this person been working? How much rest time did they have? Is there some other limits to that, right? And then what we built in there is not just work rules, but work rule progressions. So being able to inform that first level of management or supervision that's dishing out this work to people to be able to see how close they are, where are they in the progression towards reaching their limits as far as rest and spread and drive time and all these kind of things. Okay? So in practice, this is implemented in Chicago. The system is managing 7,000 employees every day, maintenance and bus, rail, and all your maintenance employees. They have a number of things and skills that they manage. So there's 19 skills that a rail operator can have within the CTA, related to work types, instructor work, supervision work, work trains. They're related to locations, they're related to employee types, and they're related to safety trained or not safety trained and all of these things. Rail maintenance has 15 skills related to maintenance jobs and supervision. They have special skills. The BPP skill means that they've been qualified to deal with hazardous waste. So should someone find a needle on a train, they've been trained to do that. So those types of things. And then related to employee types. Okay? Then they have all these work assignment rules. So they have spread less than 10.5 if it's unscheduled work. What that means is really hard for me to understand, and I've been doing this for 30 years. You can let alone someone who's trying to dispatch and hasn't been there very long, some of these rules. Maximum 12-hour daily work total, 10-hour rest in a 24-hour period, 10-hour rest between calendar days, part-time, and it's just exhausting how many things that these people who are dishing out hundreds of pieces of work every day have to manage all this stuff. Then all of a sudden they had the accident in O'Hare, right? It was attributed to the person being tired. FTA comes in, audits them, and says, you got 2 more rules that you got to manage now. Work no more than 6 and 7 days rolling. So every rolling 7 days, they have to make sure that they only work 6 of those. Recently qualified operators are only allowed to work 32 hours in a rolling 7-day period for the first year of service. Again, hard to manage, hard to understand. So you need a system to do this, right? You can't just, do this. So basically what that says is, if you're a new employee, for the first year, you can only work 32 hours a week in a 7-day period, so they end up having to give them other work to do, right? Which means they have to give them more training and other qualifications in order to not just be an operator, but be a flagman and tower people and these types of things. So lots of challenges for the CTA coming out of this. So we implemented a system. So this is how they apply it. So employees hired, training's complete. They're assigned to a division with a primary function. So you come out of it and you're saying, I'm going to be a switchman, right? The skills are applied to employees, and then they go and start selecting work, right? They bid work twice annually from that selected work. And then while we're bidding, the system's going to check those skills, right? Is that person qualified to be a switchman for that bid work or operate that train? What CTA does is they allow them to say, yep, if you're missing that skill, we're going to train you to do that job right away. Okay, so the system's going to spit out a list of these are the people you need to train. They have 30 days before the pick takes effect or something to get them up to qualified. Right? right? Their initial training, they cover sort of all of the jobs, so they get trained in sort of most of the skills there. Then, on a daily basis, this stuff moves into the day-to-day sort of activities. So again, we're going to check the skills and work to make sure that none of the skills have gone dormant or lapsed over periods of time because they need to be retrained every so often. There's rules associated to that. So we're going to check that. And it gets into daily management. Daily errors, warnings, and messages get spit out by the system so that the people on the front line understand where everybody stands, right? And retraining activities are required. And what we're trying to do is be proactive so that they're getting these messages on a daily basis, the employees being informed and the frontline staff is being informed that, hey, John Smith needs to go for retraining because his qualification is going to lapse in 30 days. Not when it does lapse, but when it's coming up to lapse, right? So then it goes back to the training complete, and again, the whole thing just keeps going. And this not only helps them making sure that they got the right people on the jobs, but they're being proactive in making sure that the skills are continuing to be up to date and that they have the right number of people in each of the job categories, because they also, these jobs I was talking about in Chicago, they get paid differently. So a lot of times they'll end up having to put a more expensive person on a job because they're the only one that's qualified left to do it because we weren't proactive to make sure we had enough switchmen. Right? So it's something you need to think about. So what I'm encouraging you to do, and you know, at the end of the day, we like to sell systems, but I think that it doesn't matter if you need to think about this as a sort of bigger issue. So you need to determine that list of things regardless of how you're going to apply that object, right, in your program. So look at everything, not just they've been trained to do these, but all the stuff, other things, licensing, medicals, how that is applied to different jobs. And then develop and turn that into some of the things that we talked about earlier, into a workflow, so how we're going to report on it, how we're going to manage it, and how we're going to track all that stuff in an effective way, right? How are we going to know in Chicago, they had a real hard time. I have 7,000 people that I'm trying to keep track of all their skills, and you know, the O'Hare accident, like you said, someone said earlier, you know, they started looking at it after the accident. They realized that there was fatigue issues. They realized that their work rules weren't being managed properly, because those dispatchers they're trying to get work out. That's their job, just get work out and get it going. And it's a Saturday afternoon, and you have a junior, you know, dispatcher there. He hasn't been in the job very long, and he's not tracking it. It's on paper, right? Build out KPIs. So we built a bunch of dashboards for management, upper management in Chicago. The other thing that they didn't realize is that they really didn't understand what was going on in the field. You're a senior executive, you sit in a downtown office, and there's 12 garages out there. You need to watch and manage and improve. And the other big thing that I always harp on, if you've listened to me talk before, is you need a constant improvement process, and for lack of a better word, within your safety program. So how do it's not just here's the program, it's tweaking that program, it's managing it, it's constantly trying to improve it as you go forward, right? And you know, that's a huge part of this. So thank you for my time. I'm running out really quick, but I'll try to keep it quick.
Apologize for going over just a little bit here. We have one final speaker, Mr. Laurent Duby from UITP. He has 15 years of international experience on strategies to reduce car dependency and encourage public transport. He has worked as a project manager for them in guidelines for planning and building LRT, and was recently appointed in the last couple of years as director of rail.
So I got this deal, 18 minutes of travel to come here for an 80-minute speech. Okay, these things happen. I promise I won't keep you for another 18 minutes. I'll fly very quickly for 6-7 minutes, as I wish my flight tomorrow would fly me home faster than it took to come here. Sorry for a little joke about this. I won't say very much on UITP. Basically, to be very fast, you know APTA well. We are an APTA worldwide. If you want more information, my excellent colleague Andy is over there. So this is some figures about what we are. You can find, we have a table there, and we will be organizing in December this year a first forum to share more between North American Rail Agency and the global sister agency in Europe, in Asia, in South America, etc. Focus of my presentation will be maybe a little bit more also on the people that were accountable for the passengers. We've spoken very much about staff, about employee. I would like to give some focus on safety consideration for urban rail. So urban rail is very well known, these very famous typology by Professor Vucic, mixed traffic, you call it streetcar, dedicated right-of-way, you call it light rail, and an exclusive right-of-way, metro or subway. And obviously these basic design arrangements have major influence on the safety records. So in UITP we've been keeping safety records for many, many decades. And in metro, what I call the system engineered safety, we're not talking about security here, you know, attacks, bombings, etc. Safety. We see 33 severe accidents in 30 last years, 19 of them with human toll. So it is less than once a year in the world that there is an accident with casualty. And you see the typology. I mean, the most frequent type of accident you see is collision, derailment, but they are not generating the most casualty. The most casualty, the single largest hazard is fire. You see very big number of casualty. Fortunately, it's very rare event. And you see that only in 2 cases, in Daegu and Baku, it was most of the victim in 30 years. So we come, depending on interpretation, between 24 and 8 victims per year in metro. Is it a lot? Yes, it's always too much, but we'll come back to that. But next to the inherent safety of our system, we are not a closed system. We carry passengers, and those passengers, again, don't put themselves in regulation. We all have rules of regulation, how to use our systems, but they are disregarded. So there are much more incidents that derive from passenger behavior. So we see here, I don't have figures for world, but I took a very well documented analysis of French situation, and you see alone in France nearly 900 such incidents per year with 8 systems in place. So you see much more frequent, fortunately much fewer casualties. Also, these are more minor incident, but still very important to be aware of this, that you can put in place all the best management, but you still have this unknown variable, that is your customer. And you see that the most frequent incidents have to do with doors, and they lead very, very, very seldom to casualties. But what is most dangerous is people falling from the platform on track for whatever reasons. Again, we will come back to this. I will show some stats, then draw some conclusion from the stats, and then try to give some hints of where we can have things that make difference to improve situation. When you look at light rail, again, completely different landscape, where in an open environment, so again, statistic from France, it shows for 25 systems, it shows also a large number of single occurrence of accidents. But again, you see much more occurrence of accidents than in metro, but much less severe. You see in total 3 casualties. You see, like was said by my predecessor, the single most frequent is collision with third parties, trucks, but also pedestrians or cyclists. And you see that those those types of accidents account for 37% of the victim, but for more than 80% of the heavily wounded and the severe and casualties. So fewer victims, but the most severe there, and the rest, it's passenger inside your vehicle, mainly as a result of emergency braking. Okay? So we'll again be back to this. Another study that we've carried of analyzing nearly 60,000 light rail accidents over a period of 10 years is, and again it has been shown, the very major factor is human errors. In more than 80% of case, the origin lies with human errors. So you're going to tell me, well, this guy is depicting a very gloom and very dark situation of showing all these casualties, victims, and safety records. But we need to remember it's global figures, and we have to benchmark with what I call the car, the silent killer. Hardly anyone, or you need to have a very, very big car accident with many vehicles involved to hit in the headlines. And unfortunately, in rail and air transport, media love this. But just look at statistics of accidents on urban roads and compare them with urban rail or the injuries. So, of course, you're going to tell me every city has cars, not every city has mass transit by rail, so maybe it's not a fair comparison. I take the point. So, next slide is here a review, a benchmark in 15 cities, mainly Europe, but you see Toronto was also part of the game, analyzing in the same city the safety record, safety situation, and you see that compared on the basis of number of accidents per million passenger kilometer, then you see in the end light rail in 15 cities proves to be 6 times safer than car traffic. So here really comparing all things being equal. We're in the same city with the same population, same behaviors, etc., etc. So, but we are still very much affected because there are these media effect and this headline trauma. So yes, urban rail accidents and victims are very rare events. The statistics shows them. Metro accidents are self-contained, very different in the analysis and the way to deal with them than light rail, which is largely imported, collision with third party. Passenger-induced accident, much more frequent than engineered safety accident. Again, something to keep in mind when we look at solutions. Third-party responsibility, much larger than staff responsibility. Human errors, we've seen, spectacular media coverage, and no compromise on safety. It has to be a boss concern. We've talked about it a lot, about the leadership, about the culture, and indeed, it's not just a poster in the lobby of your organization, but it has to be from top to front line the major thing. So now, what can we do with these lessons that we've derived from some statistics? Let's look, we like in UITP to think as a three-pillar, people, products, and procedures. And very, very briefly, to keep the time, I mean, in terms of people, training is the first thing. Training, it does not involve only your agency. Don't forget other agency staff, emergency staff, etc. It's important that they also understand your property and the context in which they might have to intervene at some later stage. So do also combine training, etc., with fire brigade, with police, etc. And talking about culture, I like this very much this point, and it shows from many agencies that it's important. Never underestimate an incident, even when there is no casualty, even if there is no injury, but every incident, every collision, every emergency braking has to be analyzed in depth in order to learn together with the involved staff. And here we're talking about culture. It's not from individual blaming, it's about collective learning from all the signs that can be the precursors to a more important accident at a later stage. We've seen that your customer, our customer, are also major factors in the safety record. So also communication and campaign, very important for them. Of course, when you introduce, for instance, a new light rail system in your city, you need to have very important awareness campaigns, safety campaigns, but also continue as it goes. You see some examples of cities which have very long tradition of light rail, like in Brussels and Stuttgart, and they continue. And they address general safety measures or more specific. And one of the things that is very worrying for many agencies is the increasing number of people carrying on their iPods and listening to music when they're in the street environment. And they are in their bubble, not aware of anything around it. And we're glad that light rail is silent. But in such situations, it is even worse. So communication and training, that's about people. For procedures, I don't want to go in detail of this, but SMS is at one part. It's on the operation side of things, but you can also, or you have also to have safety consideration as early as the design stage of your system. I no time, unfortunately, to go more in detail. Here, from a very best-in-class example in Vienna, learning from accident statistics. So data acquisition and documentation, you see through software, and then this analysis over time series helps you to identify hotspots of accidents, as you see on the map. And then detailed analysis of this hotspot help you to design, to implement ad hoc solution for the specific environment. So you see the place there, which was with this here, was a place of recurrent accident as a crossing, and it led to the measure of implementing, putting embedded LED system in the street, and when there is a tram arriving, then they start flashing to help raise the awareness of drivers. So you see very, very concrete, deriving from the statistics, from a concrete situation for one specific junction. Then let's look at some products. I selected one for metro, subway, and one for light rail. I mean, obviously we see that a major concern is the interface between platform and track. Which is really the most safety critical aspect of things. So what we see now as a state-of-the-art for greenfield project is the implementation of platform screen doors, like you would see typically in an Asian system. But it is also possible now to retrofit on legacy systems also, and you see a picture on the left there on line 1 in Paris. This line is more than 1 century old. And it has been fully retrofitted with half-height platform screen doors for various purposes, but of course safety was the primary reason for that. So yes, it is possible. There is an issue. It costs some money, both for investment and for operation. But we've seen the numbers. So if we're serious about safety, then we know what we can do. And in light rail, it's something probably less known. It is deriving from the automotive sector, where you see that automobiles are getting increasingly intelligent, autonomous, and fully equipped with sensors. And a number of automotive suppliers have developed and adapted what they call sensor fusion, which is mixture of video, laser, and radar to fit or to retrofit a light rail vehicle to try to help to have a faster driver reaction in case of collision or collision to happen. So it's analyzing the situation to try to draw the driver's attention much earlier and then prevent this situation. It has been developed in the last 3-4 4 years, and it is in the early commercial deployment right now. For instance, the city of Frankfurt in Germany has decided to retrofit 120 trains with this after extensive demonstration. And when we ask operators about their intention in the next 5 years, we see that it will play a more and more important role. So we're very quickly, and I hope I kept my 6-7 minutes. Some of the elements I wanted to share with you of first looking at the situation. It's always nice to have the figures. There is no zero risk, so whenever an accident happens, it's important to have the figures and to be able to demonstrate with robust data that yes, we're safe. And there is some emotional always aspect. We've seen these very moving, I don't know if moving is the word, but video that you showed. But beyond this understandable reaction, we have as agency also have to put things in their right frame again and state, yes, we're safe. We are definitely much safer and the safest modes of transport. But still, it's always possible to improve. That was my main message. Thank you for your attention. And now you can improve a well-deserved coffee. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all those who have participated today and enjoyed each of their discussions that they have.